I am Emma, 25 years old, and right now I am sitting in a courtroom, watching my husband of 7 years chuckle as he signs the papers that will officially end our marriage. Ethan always thought I was just a small-town girl with no real drive, someone easy to underestimate. What he did not know was that while he was sneaking around with his coworker, I was quietly building something for myself, something big, right under his nose. The judge is about to go over my financial statement, and I am looking forward to seeing that arrogant smile vanish. Before I tell you how his expression changed in an instant, I want to hear where you're watching from. I grew up in a small town in North Carolina and moved to Atlanta to study accounting at Emory University. I had big dreams of working in corporate finance, even though I came from a humble background. My parents had always drilled into me the value of hard work and saving money, lessons that would later become my foundation. I met Ethan at a coffee shop close to campus. I was buried in my financial analysis textbook when he walked over. He was in his 2 year of law school, part of a family of established Atlanta attorneys. Confidence oozed from him in a way that only comes from never worrying about money for a single day in your life. You have potential. You just need the right guidance, he said, glancing at my textbooks spread across the table. At the time, I took it as a compliment. Looking back now, I see it was both a slight and a preview of how our relationship would go. He seemed perfect, ambitious, charming, successful, and for some reason interested in me. Even though my background was ordinary, our romance escalated quickly. Ethan treated me to dinners I could not have afforded, weekend getaways to Gatlinburg, and a lifestyle I had only seen in movies. But from the start, he was always trying to refine me. He criticized my Target clothes, suggested I change my haircut to something more sophisticated, and subtly put down my college friends for having what he called limited perspectives. I worked part-time as an accounting assistant at a small firm. I enjoyed my job, the challenges it brought, and the satisfaction of seeing numbers fall into place. Ethan, however, dismissed it as just a little job and frequently suggested I did not need to work at all. "Why tire yourself out for pennies when I can give you everything you want?" he would ask. He did not understand that my career was about more than money. It was about independence and identity. After 1.5 years of dating, he proposed during a weekend trip to Asheville. The ring was stunning, the champagne expensive, and the moment perfectly staged for effect. People in the restaurant even clapped. It felt like a fairy tale, and I said yes without a second thought. Our wedding was a small, intimate affair in Charleston, South Carolina. I had insisted on keeping it simple, despite his family pushing for something grand in Atlanta. Reflecting now, that was one of the few times I managed to stand my ground against the expectations of the Hawthorne family. "At least it is in a respectable location, even if it is simple," his mother, Helen, said, her smile polite but cold. That was my first glimpse of how they saw me, not quite good enough for their son. After our honeymoon in the Caribbean, we moved into his house in Belmead, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Atlanta. The house was sleek, expensive, and impersonal, much like his family. I tried to bring in personal touches like family photos, colorful artwork, and plants, but Ethan preferred a minimalist style that flaunted wealth rather than our personality. Within months, the first cracks appeared. He questioned every decorating choice, critiqued my friends, and subtly undermined my career. "Accounting is so ordinary," he said once after meeting some of my coworkers. "You have the potential to be exceptional, but you are wasting it on small companies no one has heard of." I tried to fit into his social circle, the wives of lawyers and executives who spent their days shopping at spas or organizing charity events. They were polite, but I never felt like I belonged. At a dinner party, I overheard one of them calling me Ethan's experiment with the middle class. When I told him about it, he suggested I just try harder to fit in. "Maybe update your wardrobe or take up tennis. They need to see you are making an effort," he said, as if my identity was something to be molded. Those early years were a strange mix of luxury and loneliness. I was showered with gifts, but my self-worth slowly slipped away. I was becoming what Ethan wanted, a trophy wife who reflected well on him, while the independent, creative woman I had been was fading. 2 years into our marriage, tensions started boiling over. Ethan was always particular about money, but his behavior became controlling. Even with joint accounts, he would question every purchase I made while spending lavishly on himself. "Do you really need another set of professional development books?" he asked, staring at a credit card statement. Meanwhile, he would buy expensive watches or golf memberships without hesitation. Gradually, I became isolated from friends and family. Visits to my parents in North Carolina became rare, always replaced by some excuse, work, clients, or simply that my hometown was too provincial. My college friends stopped calling after Ethan made it clear they were not sophisticated enough. Your friend Olivia asked if our wine was from California. He would scoff after one dinner I hosted. "It is embarrassing, Emma. We cannot serve domestic wine." Even my career became a battleground. When I was offered a promotion to senior accountant, he questioned it. "Is the modest raise worth all the extra hours away from home?" he asked, showing little support for my ambition. We were going to start a family soon, remember? That caught me off guard. Every time I had brought up having children, Ethan would say it was not the right time. Around that period, I discovered a new passion, financial consulting. The firm where I worked was expanding its services, and I volunteered to learn the advisory and strategic planning side. I quickly realized I had a knack for spotting investment opportunities and creating strategies that actually worked. Excited about this new path, I told Ethan that one day I wanted to start my own small financial consulting firm. His reaction crushed me. "Emma, be realistic," he said. "Running a business takes real business sense, and that is not exactly your strength. Most small businesses fail in the first year. Why risk what we already have?" Our views on money were very different. Ethan believed in showing off wealth, the right neighborhood, the right car, the right vacations, all to maintain an image of success. I, coming from a middle-class upbringing, valued saving, smart investing, and finding true value instead of just high prices. As our third anniversary approached, Ethan's late nights at the office became the norm. Big clients, market reports, quarterly reviews, his excuses changed, but the fact he was gone did not. Most nights, I ate dinner alone, went to bed alone. I was living a life that felt single, but under the financial oversight of someone treating me like a child with an allowance. Our first real fight happened after his family's annual Christmas gathering. On the ride home, his mother asked pointedly when we would give her grandchildren. I told her I was ready whenever Ethan was, only to have him smoothly switch the topic. When I confronted him at home, he was cold. "Children are a huge responsibility and expensive," he said, loosening his tie. "With your modest career and my family's expectations, any child would need trust funds, private schooling, the right connections. We are not there yet financially." I stared at him, confused. "Not there yet? Ethan, you make 7 figures. Your family has generational wealth. What are we waiting for?" His response was revealing. "It is not about money. You have not established yourself yet. What would you contribute to a child's future?" His words stung and lingered for days. He dismissed my career, mocked my salary, and made me realize I needed financial independence, not just for my career but for my sanity. That week, I quietly opened a separate bank account at a different bank. I set up a small direct deposit from my paycheck, just enough to start building my own foundation without him noticing. At the same time, I started educating myself about financial independence. I read investing books, took free online business courses, and subscribed to newsletters about entrepreneurship. I did it all secretly, using private browsing so Ethan would not find out. The woman who had once been swept away by fancy dinners and grand gestures was waking up to the golden cage she lived in and plotting her escape, step by step. While Ethan spent late nights at work, I began building my independence. I used my small savings to register a business, Emma Harrison Financial Solutions. I built a simple, professional website to showcase my skills and services. Finding time to work without Ethan noticing was tricky. I turned our seldom-used guest bedroom into a home office, telling him I needed a space for continuing education at work. He barely paid attention, dismissing my effort as cute ambition, rather than a serious plan. "Just do not let it interfere with our social events," he said, unconcerned. My first client came by chance at a local coffee shop. I overheard Sarah Harrison, who ran a growing catering business, complaining about how expensive financial consultants were. I cannot afford $10,000 for a financial plan, but I am losing money somewhere, she told her business partner. I introduced myself, explained my background, and offered to help her for a fraction of the cost since I was building my portfolio. Isabella took a chance on me, and the results were even better than expected. I streamlined her cash flow, renegotiated payment terms with vendors, and created an investment strategy that boosted her profits by 30% in the first 2 months. She referred me to other small business owners, helping my network grow. Working with Isabella gave me both my first success and a real friendship, something I had missed in Ethan's carefully curated social circle. She appreciated my skills in a way my husband never did. "You have a gift, Emma," she told me over coffee. "You understand money in a way that helps real people build real wealth. Never forget that." I worked late nights while Ethan was away on increasingly frequent business trips. I converted our walk-in closet into a makeshift office for client calls, using blankets to muffle the sound. Each new client brought a mix of excitement and fear. Exciting because my business was growing, scary because discovery could lead to confrontation. The learning curve was steep. I made mistakes, sometimes undercharging for complicated projects or overpromising on timelines. But I learned fast. Every client taught me something about running a business, setting boundaries, and valuing my own expertise. I used my savings to invest in software and certifications, hiding expenses among household costs or paying cash when needed. Over the course of a 2-year, my client list steadily grew, mostly through referrals and word of mouth. I did not spend the profits I earned. Instead, I reinvested most of them back into the business and set aside a portion for strategic investments. Ethan noticed my confidence growing, but he assumed it was just me finally settling into the lifestyle he expected, not realizing I was finding fulfillment in my own work. A turning point came when I worked with a tech startup founder. After I helped her restructure her finances, she secured a major funding round. The success was featured in Atlanta Business Magazine. I could not be named for privacy reasons, but the article gave me credibility and opened doors to bigger clients. Through Isabella, Cassandra Lynn, a serial entrepreneur who had sold her previous company for 7 figures and was launching a fintech startup. She hired me for a small project at first, but she quickly became both a mentor and a valued client. "You are charging way too little for your skills," she told me bluntly after reviewing my rate sheet. "Triple your prices. Watch how your perceived value changes." She was right. When I raised my rates, I did not lose clients. In fact, I began attracting more established businesses willing to pay for quality. Patricia also taught me about angel investing and portfolio management. "Cash loses value sitting still," she said. "Your money needs to work for you." Under her guidance, I began investing in emerging companies, including her fintech startup, which focused on artificial intelligence-driven financial planning tools. I started small, but as my business expanded, so did my investments. Watching both my company and my portfolio grow was exhilarating. For the first time since meeting Ethan, I felt alive, purposeful, and independent. I was creating something of value entirely on my own. Despite my growing independence, I maintained the appearance of being just Ethan's wife at social events. I nodded politely when his colleagues' wives discussed shopping trips and charity committees. I went to his work dinners, played the supportive spouse perfectly, all while running a thriving business from our home and making financial decisions that would change my life. The double life was exhausting, but it was empowering. Every client, every successful consultation, every investment return was a step toward the freedom I knew I needed from my controlling marriage. 5 years into our marriage, the facade began to crack. It started with a text message that appeared on Ethan's phone while he was in the shower. A preview on his lock screen from someone named Red. "Missing you already. Last night was..." The message vanished before I could read more, but it planted a seed of suspicion I could not ignore. Ethan had been increasingly distant, often coming home with unfamiliar perfume on him, claiming it was from hugging colleagues at networking events. Instead of confronting him immediately, I decided to investigate. I noted patterns: late Thursday meetings that ran past 10 o'clock, weekend conferences that had no websites I could verify, and an increase in client dinners at a specific upscale downtown restaurant. The following Thursday, I told Ethan I was going to help Isabella with a special corporate event at her catering company. Instead, I parked near the restaurant he frequented and waited. At 8:30, his Porsche pulled into the lot. 9 minutes later, a red Toyota arrived and a blonde woman stepped out. Even from a distance, I recognized Madeline Bennett, a colleague from his law firm. I watched as they embraced in a way that was far too intimate for coworkers. I saw him kiss her in the parking lot before they went inside together. My hands shook as I snapped photos with my phone, my stomach hollow with betrayal and confirmation. I waited 20 minutes before walking into the restaurant. They sat at a corner table, his hand on hers, leaning close. "This explains the late meetings," I said, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. Ethan jerked back, his face shifting through shock, guilt, and then settling on annoyance. Madeline looked embarrassed, grabbed her purse, and mumbled something about going to the restroom. "Emma, this is not what it looks like," Ethan said, using the same smooth tone he reserved for difficult clients. "Really? Because it looks like you are having dinner with your girlfriend while your wife thinks you are working," I said. The conversation that followed was surreal. Ethan offered a weak apology, insisted it was just physical, and even tried to blame me for his cheating. "You have been so wrapped up in your little accounting projects," he whispered, drawing attention from nearby diners. "You have become boring, Emma, unambitious. When was the last time you made an effort in our marriage?" I left the restaurant alone, driving aimlessly for hours before returning home. Ethan came back after noon, promising to end the affair, suggesting counseling, even proposing a second honeymoon. For reasons I did not fully understand at the time, I pretended to consider it. "I need time," I told him. Not a lie, because I did need time, but not to forgive him. I needed time to plan my next moves. The weeks that followed became a masterclass in deception on both sides. Ethan temporarily became attentive again, bringing flowers and planning date nights, while I began consulting with divorce attorneys during my supposed client meetings. Adriana Ramirez, a highly recommended divorce attorney Patricia introduced me to, laid out the reality. "North Carolina is an equitable distribution state," she explained. "Without a prenuptial agreement, the court divides marital assets based on fairness, not necessarily equality." She taught me about our financial entanglements, the challenges of divorcing someone from a wealthy family, and the importance of documenting everything. "Knowledge is power," she said, especially in divorce. My cautious information gathering came to an abrupt halt when Ethan discovered my browser history on our shared computer. I had forgotten to use private browsing for one simple search: North Carolina divorce asset division process. His rage was immediate and frightening. He cornered me in the kitchen, waving his phone with a screenshot he'd taken. "Is this what you've been doing? Planning to divorce me and take my money?" His face was red, a vein pulsing in his forehead. "Let me make this clear, Emma. You'll have nothing without me. Nothing. My family's lawyers will make sure of it." I remained calm, which only seemed to fuel his anger further. "I'm not planning anything, Ethan. I was just researching after what happened. Wouldn't you do the same?" He seemed mollified by my explanation, but the threat lingered. That night, I moved all my important business documents into secure cloud storage and began transferring digital records to drives I locked away in a safety deposit box he knew nothing about. 3 weeks later, I made another discovery, this one impossible to explain away. While organizing our closet, I found a folded jewelry receipt tucked inside his dress shoes. Tiffany and Company. 2 months prior. A diamond tennis bracelet. Cost nearly $10,000. I had never received such a gift. Even knowing about the affair, the tangible proof of his devotion to Madeline stung deeper than I expected. He had spent our money on her. Before I could fully process, I heard the front door open. Laughter. Ethan's voice and a woman's. They came into our bedroom, clearly not expecting me home midday. I stepped out of the closet to find them embracing at the foot of the bed we had shared for 5 years. "Emma," Ethan exclaimed, not even letting go of Madeline. "You're supposed to be at work." "I took a half day," I said, my composure shocking even me. Clearly, I should have called first. What followed was not the dramatic confrontation I had always imagined. Instead, Ethan was coldly pragmatic. Straightening his tie, he said, "Well, this saves me having a difficult conversation. I want a divorce, Emma. Madeline and I are planning a future together." Then, with arrogant certainty, he laid out his terms. I could keep my personal items and a small settlement to help me get back on my feet. The house, our investments, even the furniture we had purchased together, all his. "My lawyers will be in touch," he concluded, visibly confused by my lack of hysteria. "You should find somewhere else to stay starting tonight." "Actually," I replied evenly, "as this is still legally my residence, I'll be staying. You and Madeline are welcome to find a hotel." His face darkened, but Madeline tugged at his arm. "Let's go, Ethan. We can deal with this later." At the door, he delivered one last shot. "You'll regret not taking my generous offer. By the time my lawyers are done, you'll be lucky to afford a trailer park in the worst part of Atlanta." I closed the door behind them, leaned against it, and for the first time since discovering his affair, I smiled. Ethan had no idea what was coming. The next day, he moved most of his belongings out. I changed the locks that afternoon. Legally questionable, yes, but it gave me time to catalog everything in the house before he could strip it bare. His first settlement offer arrived a week later, a one-time payment of $45,000 and 7 months of living expenses in exchange for me forfeiting all claims to our other assets. "He's testing the waters," Adriana said when I showed her the papers. "He assumes you don't know your rights or the true extent of your marital assets." With her guidance, I rejected the offer and initiated financial discovery, the legal requirement for both parties to disclose all assets and liabilities. Ethan's lawyer responded with delay after delay, obstruction at every turn. "This is standard," Adriana assured me. "They're trying to exhaust your resources and patience until you settle for less." But Ethan didn't realize I had already been tracking our finances for years. Every account, every transfer, even ones he thought I didn't know about. And beyond that, I had my own thriving business and investments he knew nothing about. After careful consideration, Adriana and I agreed on a strategy. For now, we would withhold the full scope of my financial independence. North Carolina law generally considered businesses started during marriage to be marital property, but Adriana identified an exception. Ethan had actively discouraged my business and contributed nothing to its growth. "We'll disclose everything at the right time," she assured me. "But for now, let him keep believing his own story about you." As the legal battle crawled forward, Ethan waged war socially. Friends stopped returning my calls. Invitations vanished. Even neighbors avoided me. Later, I learned why. Ethan had spread lies that I cheated, that I was unstable, that he was the one making the noble sacrifice of ending our marriage. In the circles where his family's name carried weight, his narrative was accepted without question. The sting of that betrayal, of social exile, was sharper than I anticipated. All the people I used to celebrate holidays with, share secrets with, and mark life's milestones with had disappeared from my life because of Ethan's lies. Everyone, that is, except Isabella and Patricia. Those two never stopped supporting me. People who believe rumors without hearing both sides are not worth wasting energy on. I remember Isabella saying it to me one afternoon over some emergency pastries in her catering kitchen after an especially rough day. "Stop mourning the old life. Focus on building the new one." Meanwhile, Ethan's attempts to intimidate me only got worse once he realized I would not just roll over. There were late-night phone calls with threats thinly veiled as concern, warnings that I would never work in the city again, and even suggestions that he would report my business for supposed tax issues. Empty threats, since every single transaction in my company was documented down to the penny. Even his family got involved. His mother, Helen, called me once, trying to reason with me. "We always knew you were not right for Ethan," she said in that tone that made every word feel like a jab. "But he chose you, so just take what is being offered and move on with some dignity." I held my calm, a skill I had perfected over years of subtle put-downs at Hawthorne family gatherings. Thank you for your concern, Helen, I replied. I will follow my attorney's advice. Ethan's overconfidence started to backfire. He assumed I could not fight a drawn-out legal battle, so he made mistake after mistake. He forgot to disclose certain investment accounts I had documentation for. He underreported the value of his stock portfolio. He claimed assets were his alone when they had clearly been bought with marital funds. My attorney, Adriana, kept track of every discrepancy, carefully building a record that would eventually tear down his credibility in court. During all of this, my business grew faster than I could have imagined. A financial restructuring plan I had created for a regional restaurant chain helped them avoid bankruptcy and triple their profits. Industry publications took notice, though I had to turn down interviews for personal reasons. This attention, however, brought a wave of new clients. The real turning point came when I landed a contract with a national retail chain to overhaul their entire financial strategy, a deal worth 7 figures that turned my business from successful to extraordinary. I hired 5 employees, rented an office in downtown Atlanta, and even began turning down clients whose values did not match my company's mission. Meanwhile, Ethan and his legal team continued to portray me as a struggling bookkeeper dependent on my husband's money. They could not wrap their minds around the idea that I was building a thriving career entirely on my own. Patricia introduced me to a group of angel investors interested in promising financial technology startups. They were impressed by my mix of real-world financial expertise and tech vision, and they agreed to fund a revolutionary financial planning app one had been working on. The app used artificial intelligence to give small businesses and individuals personalized financial advice. Within 7 months of launching the beta version, we had 50,000 users and even received acquisition offers from major financial institutions. I also invested strategically in other startups, using my knowledge and connections to find companies with huge potential. My portfolio spread across technology, real estate, and emerging markets, carefully managed to grow returns while keeping risk low. The night before our final court date, I sat alone in the house that had never felt like mine, thinking about how far I had come. 5 years ago, I had been so eager to please Ethan that I lost myself in the process. His betrayal, painful as it was, forced me to rediscover my own strength and ambition. I packed a small overnight bag. No matter what the judge decided, I was not staying another night in the place where my marriage fell apart. My new penthouse, purchased secretly through a limited liability company, was ready. I had furnished it for beauty and comfort, not for status. As I zipped my bag, my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Remember who you are tomorrow, not who he tried to make you be. I held those words close as I prepared for the last chapter of my marriage to Ethan Hawthorne. Court day arrived clear and crisp. I wore a navy blue suit, conservative but confident, and a single piece of jewelry, a small diamond pendant Isabella and Patricia had given me for my company's 2nd anniversary. They called it my Independence Diamond. I arrived 20 minutes early, just as Adriana had advised. Ethan was already there, dressed in an expensive charcoal suit with his attorney, David Harrison, standing beside him. David was a senior partner at one of Atlanta's top law firms, known for winning aggressive divorce settlements in favor of wealthy clients. Ethan smirked when he saw me, whispering something to David that made both men laugh. He looked certain of victory, as though this was nothing more than a formality. Adriana arrived moments later in a burgundy suit that stood out in the courthouse. Unlike David with his team of junior associates, she worked alone, focused, calm, and precise. "Ready?" she asked quietly. "More than ready," I replied. Judge Catherine Williams' courtroom was intimidating in its darkness. She was a woman in her 50s with silver hair and piercing eyes, known for being fair but impatient with games or drama. As the proceedings began, Ethan launched into a performance worthy of an Oscar, portraying himself as the devoted husband who had supported my modest career ambitions, only to be met with ingratitude and unreasonable demands in the divorce. "I just want a fair outcome, Your Honor," Ethan said, trying to sound calm and disappointed at the same time. "I have offered Mrs. Hawthorne a generous settlement, so she can live comfortably while rebuilding her career." His attorney, David Harrison, laid out their case for dividing the assets. They emphasized Ethan's family wealth as separate property, downplayed my contributions to what we had built together, and argued that the house, bought mostly with his earnings, should stay his. Through all of it, I stayed calm. I did not react to Ethan's lies, and I kept my emotions in check. Justice Harrington glanced at me occasionally, but her face gave away nothing. When it was time to sign the initial divorce decree, just separating our marital status while the financial details were sorted, Ethan made a scene. He signed with a flourish, laughing as he capped his long pen. As he walked back to his seat, he leaned close enough to whisper, "Enjoy going back to your parents' farm." Then it was Adriana's turn. Her approach was careful and methodical, nothing like David's dramatic performance. She laid out all the evidence of Ethan's financial deception during our marriage, the hidden accounts, his extravagant spending on Madeline, and his pattern of controlling money. "Your Honor," Adriana said, "Mr. Hawthorne has not fully disclosed marital assets as required by North Carolina law." She submitted documents showing the accounts Ethan had kept secret, including dates, account numbers, and approximate balances. Ethan shifted in his seat, his smug expression giving way to nervous glances at David. David asked for a short break, but Justice Harrington refused. "I want to hear about these undisclosed assets," she said. Adriana carefully dismantled Ethan's financial claims, piece by piece. Justice Harrington's face grew more serious with every document presented. "Furthermore, Your Honor," Adriana continued, "we request that the court consider Mrs. Hawthorne's separate property, established during the marriage without any contribution or support from Mr. Hawthorne." This was the moment we had been preparing for. Justice Harrington looked up from her notes. "Please explain, Counselor." "Mrs. Hawthorne started a financial consulting business during the marriage," Adriana said. "Mr. Hawthorne not only provided no support, he actively discouraged her, belittling her professional ambitions. Here are emails and texts showing him dismissing her business as a hobby and trying to derail her goals." Justice Harrington reviewed the documents closely, then addressed me directly for the first time. "Mrs. Hawthorne, has the court received complete information about this business venture?" "Not yet, Your Honor," I said, just as we had planned. "My complete financial statement is ready to submit today." Adriana handed a sealed envelope to the court clerk. It contained my full financial disclosure, the document we had deliberately held back until this critical moment. "I request the court review Mrs. Hawthorne's financial statement before making any decisions about asset division," Adriana said. Justice Harrington nodded and opened the envelope. The courtroom went silent as she read, her eyebrows lifting slightly in surprise, the only hint of emotion from her otherwise composed expression. Finally, she looked up. "For the record, I will summarize Mrs. Hawthorne's assets." My heart was pounding as she began. Emma Harrison Financial Solutions, a financial consulting firm started 3 years ago. Current valuation, based on revenue, contracts, and intellectual property, $2,100,000. Ethan's head snapped up. His disbelief was almost comical. Investment portfolio, including technology stocks, real estate, and startup investments, $10,100,000. He gripped the table so hard his knuckles were white. Real estate holdings, 2 properties purchased within the last 18 months, valued at $1,100,000. Ethan looked physically ill. His face had drained of color, his body stiff with shock. Beside him, David was whispering frantically, but Ethan seemed unable to process what he was hearing. Total disclosed assets, $5,200,000, Justice Harrington concluded. The courtroom was silent. Ethan stared at me as if I were a stranger. In that moment, I did not feel triumph or vindication, only a deep relief that the truth was finally official. Justice Harrington broke the silence. "Mr. Hawthorne, do you wish to revise any of your previous statements regarding Mrs. Hawthorne's financial dependence on you?" Ethan could not speak. David stood quickly. "Your Honor, we were not aware of these assets. Since they were acquired during the marriage, we contend Mr. Hawthorne is entitled to a fair share." Adriana was ready. "Your Honor, we direct the court's attention to the prenuptial agreement signed by both parties before marriage, specifically Clause 15. This was our trump card. Years earlier, while reviewing the prenup, Adriana had discovered a clause that even Ethan's own lawyers had included. Any business started by either spouse during the marriage, without financial investment from the other spouse, remains separate property in a divorce. The clause was likely meant to protect Ethan's ventures, but it applied to my business just the same. Justice Harrington read the agreement and nodded. The language is clear. Miss Ramirez, continue. Adriana outlined how I had built my business entirely from scratch, using my own savings and reinvesting profits. All while Ethan actively discouraged my efforts, she brought forward statements from clients and mentors, all confirming that I had worked independently and had a sharp sense for business. As Adriana spoke, I watched Ethan, the man who had been laughing just hours earlier while signing our divorce papers, now sitting completely still. His usual air of confidence was shattered. Madeline, who had been quietly observing from the gallery, slipped out without a word, her face unreadable. Justice Harrington spent about 20 minutes reviewing the documents before returning with her decision. When she came back, there was no hesitation. She declared that Emma Harrison Financial Solutions, along with the associated investment portfolio, belonged entirely to me as separate property, in line with the prenuptial agreement. Ethan let out a strangled noise somewhere between a gasp and a protest. Justice Harrington continued, noting that because Ethan had failed to fully disclose all marital assets as the law required, the court would divide the remaining marital property in a way that favored me. The rest of her ruling was filled with legal jargon, but the message was clear. I would keep my business, my investments, and my properties. On top of that, I would receive a larger share of our marital assets because of Ethan's dishonesty. The house would be sold, and the proceeds would be divided according to the judge's formula, which was heavily in my favor. As we were leaving, Ethan came toward me, his lawyer struggling to hold him back. "You planned this," he hissed, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. "All these years, you were just waiting to take me down." I looked at the man I had once loved, now a stranger trapped in his own version of events. "No, Ethan," I said calmly. "I built something while you were busy tearing everything apart. That is the difference between us." Adriana gently steered me away, leaving Ethan standing alone in the nearly empty courtroom, the pieces of his superiority complex scattered around him. Walking out of the courthouse that day did not feel like victory. It felt like freedom. The heavy burden of deception, his lies, and my necessary secrecy fell away with every step down the marble stairs. Today, my company operates internationally. My investments keep growing, and I have used my resources to create a foundation that helps women achieve financial independence. Ethan tried to reach out after realizing my net worth, but I had long moved beyond the woman who once sought his approval. If you are watching this and facing betrayal or being underestimated, know that what looks like an ending can be the start of something much bigger. Your value is not measured by someone else's inability to see it.